All right. So here we are in the tooling group meeting for May 21st. And oh gosh. So what do we got here? I think top of mind, I'm just going to do this agenda out of order. But first thing I wanted to talk about, I think, is the shutil stuff. So here's Rebecca. So yeah, I did. Sorry, I tend to like cram everything in right before the meeting. So I took a look at a closer look at Ian's pull request, and I didn't have too much to say about it. I mean, it looked good to me. Isaac just popped in and says we should not create a new module called shutil. We should put all this stuff in FS. I CC'd Raphael there too, because I feel like that was probably your idea. So to kind of explain the reasoning behind it, it would be worth going over again why we wanted to put that into a separate module.
Yeah, I think my feedback was like, I don't hate the idea of having it in a separate module. I think it reduces, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But I would kind of think shutil, unless it comes from Python, right? Is that where it comes from, or where does it come from?
Yeah, I think it's from Python.
Yeah, like unless you're pretty deeply embedded in the Python community, that's kind of a terrible name. Like it doesn't tell me a thing of it. Like it doesn't make me think file system functions. So it's like, I feel like my vote would be put it in another module, but maybe not shutil, just because it feels like we're taking a name that's not that great from another community that you'd have to be part of to know. That's my 2 cents. But I wouldn't block on that either.
So I would say, yeah, I'm not super married to the actual name. I always prefer prior art. If anybody has a good, I think for Windows, there is there's the Windows scripting host. There it's called shell. Those kinds of utilities. So maybe shell utilities instead of shutil, like be more verbose. But I think calling it shell utilities is pretty close to what our intentions are. And I'll go into detail in the thread.
I just wonder, Raphael, does it kind of pigeonhole us a bit that are they, is it an extension to available shell commands, or is it extension to the file system API? Like I just wonder, is it a shell or is it a file system API? Like, shell just feels like a weirdly overloaded word to me.
So it's a good question, but there are things that might not, they might seem very file system-y, but like loosely connected. Things like recursive create directory, recursive copy. Well, for Windows, you have like open a window, close a window, execute. Things like dealing with batch commands, dealing with shebangs in Node. All those things seem more, shell is a loaded word, but again, I'm here basing on prior art, and I think that's like
that's fair. It does feel like. Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
I was going to say my model for this, Ben, is these are things that you need when you're writing the equivalent of shell scripts in Node.
That's a fair point. And shell util is from Python. Is that where it comes from? Yeah.
So shutil is Python. The Windows scripting environment calls it just shell. I can look up some more examples. I think .NET calls this area shell, but I'm not sure.
That seems reasonable to me. I mean, I agree with you. Like prior art is probably better, and I disagree with Isaac about putting it in the global namespace, just because I think that will create way more tension trying to land it, and isn't even maybe preferable.
So, yeah, I mean, the way I understand it anyway is if you didn't know how these things work, like a recursive makedir, you'd say, oh, well, that's a file system thing. But it's not really. It's a loop over a file system thing. It's like one higher a level up of abstraction. But I mean, I can see how people would say, well, oh, that should be in FS because it's working with the file system, right? So I mean, I get that, but I like the calling it. This is what you need when you're writing a shell script in Node. So what then? What's a good way to say? I mean, do we not want to put this? Considering that people may expect it to be in FS, which is not, I don't think that's unreasonable. What's the rationale for not putting it there? Just to that it's crowded, or?
I mean, I think sort of to your point, like it's not necessarily a FS utility. It's something kind of on top of FS. I think that's probably the best argument that I can think of for not putting it in there. I think one thing that's going to be a little confusing, like we just talked about a whole bunch of other things that are shell related that could be in that module, but the fact that this is going to be submitted like on its own as the only function in that module, so that context isn't really there. So I don't know if maybe that just needs to be kind of explained a little bit in the PR, what sort of like the future intentions are here.
Yeah. I guess maybe one way to look at it is, well, I like the way of looking at it, like because the other confusion we're going to have is as if we start to lay in some of our improvements to child process management, so that it's less coupled to, so there's a cleaner abstraction. Like people are going to be like, why isn't that in child process? So it will be like, why isn't RimRaf in FS? Why isn't this improved spawn that doesn't have any of the edge case wonkiness on per platform? Why is this not in child process? So maybe we just need to explain that reasoning that child process and FS are the kind of atomic building block bits, and then this is, like we were saying, one layer of abstraction, right? I kind of like that argument seems to hold weight.
Yeah, and again, like we're basing this on prior art. FS and child process are more, like they are sort of like the equivalent of OS, of like POSIX and Win32 APIs, and these are utilities. So I could have called it utilities, but that's the worst namespace possible. They are higher level abstractions that don't map, that don't have a one-to-one correspondence with a file system API, or like a really low level other API, and so we have a chance to go crazy.
So my only other question is, like, did we make the right choice making Mictor recursive part of the FS API? That's kind of a straw person question.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, I mean, it would seem reasonable to me to want to alias it or move it even. Not unheard of. It's happened before. I mean, I can't remember what it was that was in Path that eventually wound up in FS. But
I mean, tons of people were asking for an alias because it would have helped them feature detect it as well. If you remember the argument way back in the day. So like maybe that's the perfect. Maybe then we can move two things into shutil right away. We have a mcdirt, which lets people feature detect mcdirt, which is just an alias to mcdirt recursive, and then we have the work being done on rimraf, right? Then there's two things and not just one, which is great.
I think that in my point of view, anyway, these two should be like two PRs, and what we have and like for reference and for context, we have our conversations and the meeting notes, and we just need to like defragment the knowledge back into the PR thread, and comment back and say we gave this some thought. This was our reasoning. If you strongly disagree, then let's escalate it up to a vote. I like when things get into this like kind of bite sheddy, really personal preference area, bring it up to a vote. See what if we can't get consensus, see what the majority, and just move on.
Yeah, we're probably not going to get it right initially. I think as long as we're sort of in agreement that it should be in a new module, I think we can call that whatever shutil or shell and submit the PR with that, and then people will have opinions about what the actual name should be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sold on shutil or shell at this point with that reasoning, and I don't know, it kind of makes me want to follow on with that mcdirt PR too, which I think will help even explain what we're doing better. And it's probably not that much work.
Great, I'm all for it. I'll hit some keys and follow up.
all right. So then, Ian, I realize you haven't had a chance to hack on it anymore, but I mean, it seems pretty close to being ready anyway. So if you could reach out or something, or just tag us when you open that PR, I think that would be really helpful, or just tag the group.
Right. Yeah, I have not had a chance to do any work on it since the last meeting, but I am really hoping that I'll have some time either this week or weekend to get it submitted. I think I just need to make sure the linter is passing, and then I also wanted to. There's a number of like existing tests in the rimraf package. I wanted to try to like port over as many of those as possible to cover, all of those cases. That's really the only like outstanding work in my mind for submitting the real PR.
Yeah, and Isaac said he doesn't care one bit about the license, right? So
right.
He's perfectly happy to have it cargo culted.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't know if anybody has time to do that. I mean, it seems like it would be reasonable for other people to try to contribute some of those tests, because that seems like it might be kind of a lot of work to nodeify the tests.
Yeah, they use the app, I think, right now.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Raphael just said in the chat, like tests, I think especially for this, I mean, we're like literally like recursively deleting trees in your file system. Tests are probably pretty important. I don't want someone to yell at me for
removing root or something. Yeah. We ended up having to bring over like all the sleep logic too. Like we just kind of brought over everything, right?
Yes. The only real changes that I made was instead of, I think, using assert to check certain parameters, it now does like it'll throw the proper exception. That was really all that I changed.
Awesome. This is super exciting. Like, I think you made the right choice because the logic is so wonky.
Yeah,
It's like, just bring it over.
exactly. I don't have like Windows or Solaris or whatever available to test on. So, but I think if we have a decent like test suite, and then it'll run like on CI on all those platforms, right?
Sounds good to me.
All right, yeah. So, anyways, my plan is to I'm going to try to. I have a little bit of time this week and this weekend, so I want to get that in there as soon as possible.
So kind of like a meta question about this. So, is there a precedent for pulling almost nearly verbatim a userland module into Node Core?
Yeah, we had Node Inspector, Node Inspect. We did that. We have Acorn, but it's internal. Stuff I want to say stuff about readable stream, but I'm not really sure about like the particulars of that. But
Process report was ported to yeah.
Oh, and then now the freeze intrinsics, but that was like single file, so that was easier. So yeah, we have precedence on that.
I was going to say my only concern, it's not like Isaac said, he's totally cool, so we don't have to worry about offending the maintainer, but just from a legal providence point of view, I might ask a lawyer friend about, do we have to slap a license on everything? We probably do. So even if Isaac is saying that he doesn't care, like from a legal standpoint, you actually would need all the contributors ever to agree to a license change.
Yeah, I think the license will need to be included somewhere.
Yeah,
I'm not exactly sure where or what that process is.
Probably just at the top of each file, but I'll confirm. I'm not a lawyer, so I shouldn't say.
The problem is that file is going to contain a bunch of other stuff as well. But yeah, I don't know if there's like a list of these licenses somewhere. My plan was just to submit the PR and have like a to-do in the description that we need to get the license in there somehow. Because I don't know about how to do that.
Yeah, Rebecca and I are friends with an open source lawyer who will probably be willing to help.
There's also build tooling in Node that extracts licenses from the source base to produce a unified license document.
Yeah, we have for the outgoing, like public-facing license of Node, there's just an aggregate of all the tools that we use and are bundled into the binary. So there's a tool / license builder.sh that creates Node's root license file. So just drop, if it's just, if it's a standard MIT APL, I don't know, just drop it somewhere and reference it in license builder, and it will put the necessary magic incantations in the public license.
Okay, I will take a look at that.
So for some of these userland modules that were pulled in, what happens to like the open bugs?
On a case-to-case basis, obviously. If things, I think there's like a migration process or like period where the standalone package is still maintained and then revendered in some way into Node until the standalone package atrophies and the bugs become Node bugs.
Mm-hmm.
which you can just reference any open bugs or the prior art in the repository, and you're asking about existing open bugs or new open bugs.
Well, both. I mean, yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's like a lot of context and history around this code that we're pulling in. And so does it make sense to, instead of, copying and pasting it, to actually to pull in the Git history and then work from there? Just to have that, like, a better view into the history of that code base. Because Rimraf especially, I think, is just this like crazy maze of weird, one-off edge cases and bugs that have to do with particular systems. And anybody stepping into this code, which would now be in Node, is going to look at it and be like, well, why the hell is that there? And nobody's going to be able to tell them anything without that history.
So on the other hand, Node has a long history of just vendoring in and flattening Git histories. I could build a script that puts the original file URL at the header of each file, so there'll be easy navigation. We also have for the API documentation, we have some black magic that like parses the code and tries to link the API endpoints to the code where they are implemented. So in theory, we could rewrite those URLs and point to the package instead of the vendored code in Node. So at least people who are looking at the API will see a rich history. I'm like, I like the concept of how's it called, tree replanting? It has a name. Of putting the Git history, but I'm not sure how technically feasible that is.
Right. I mean, I guess in a way I'm just kind of concerned about, I mean, it's kind of like brain drain, right? Unless Isaac wants to come in and maintain the thing in Node core, certainly we can ask questions of him, but it's going to be kind of more work to track down why this works in this way. Why that one comment says life is pain or whatever. Like what is unique to the history here? Where did that come from, and why, and who reported it, in what context? Is it still valid?
So I would just say that Node is a big amalgamation of like a ton of vendored libraries, and an advanced, an intermediate level Node developer needs to know how to do this kind of spillover.
I was going to echo what Raphael is saying and just say, like, let's make sure that we have links in what is the ported code so folks can go back and look at the Rimraf history. But I think it would create a lot of work to try to bring in the whole history, partially just because it's going to be squashed once the merge is landed anyways, just by virtue of how commits land on Node.
The solution in other languages has been dual life modules, where they exist both in the registry and in core. And core updates, it's essentially the way NPM is distributed with Node. Although I think the module resolution algorithm makes it impossible for us to do this in Node, unfortunately, because it will load the internal version in preference over the file system version. So you can't install something from the registry to override that. unless it has like, yeah, it would have to be distributed under a different name.
I mean, this is like this is how V8 comes in. It just gets squashed in occasionally.
Right.
Yeah,
And then
and
It's-
HTTP parser and HTTP2 and even NPM.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's the way the majority of Perl core is brought in as well. In Perl, is most of their modules are actually live on the CPAN, and you can install them separately and get updates sooner than core would update. But if you don't, you by default get the one that comes with core.
the thing is, like Ian said, though, he has made a few idiomatic changes to the library to better match locally available libraries and
Yep.
whatnot. So bringing it in would be annoying.
Or need a new major.
I think linking to the like original like just a comment that says like this code was ported from RimRaf and here's a link to like the GitHub page and you can view the history there. I think that's definitely something we should do. Yeah, in terms of like the modules sort of like coexisting, like I'm not sure. I think like RimRaf will have to continue to exist, and assuming we're not backporting this. And like maybe eventually RimRaf just becomes like, it just checks for the presence of this function and uses it if it's there, otherwise uses its own implementation.
There's the glob thing that they still have to field,
Right.
but other than that, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I took out all the glob functionality. Someone mentioned docs as well. Is that something that I need to write as part of this PR?
I would say since it's a single endpoint, just describe the parameters and their like general description of the functionality and reference the original package. I would say that's like I think that's what we did for Node Inspect.
Okay.
Cool. So maybe use Node Inspect as inspiration. I'd be willing to help with that too, Ian, because it would be nice to like get it stubbed out a little bit so we can go from one to multiple libraries in this namespace. So
Right.
maybe do a little bit of. I think it's worth doing the footwork.
Okay.
All right. So yeah. Moving on. Let's see. I did want to have a meeting at the Collaborator Summit. I don't know who's going to be there. But if any of you are going to be there, I'm going to be there, and maybe we can hang out. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I'll be there.
Okay.
We can go to Berghain or something. Go hear some house music and work on node tooling. German club.
I don't know if I want to make it like I don't know if I want to make it like an official thing because it might be difficult to set up the video conferencing or just like a pain in the butt. So maybe just it should be more of an informal. Let's not really decide too hard on anything. But it just kind of depends. So if you know, I haven't looked to see if the actual schedule has been released. So I'm not sure when it's going to be exactly, except that it's going to be at the summit.
So just 2 comments for the sake of exclusivity. Some people are not able to attend for various reasons. So like the mandate, let's say, of the Collaborator Summit is to discuss, fast track things, and then loop them back into the official canonic channels, which are GitHub and these meetings. So if anything interesting happens, try to document it so you can put it in writing so everybody could read. and follow up. And the second thing, if anybody doesn't know, the foundation has a travel stipend, and if anybody wants to attend but can't for financial reasons, they can submit a request for a stipend to travel to the Collaborators Summit, which is a great thing.
That's something I'd like to find out more about that. Maybe not for the Collaborator Summit because it's coming up here pretty quick, but we were talking about Node Interactive, for example. Because I'm kind of like independent, like my company doesn't sponsor me to do these things. So how can I?
Go to Node.js/admin. There are 3 things there, and the biggest one is the travel fund. It's pretty well documented.
Okay.
Alrighty. And so argument parsing was on the agenda. Nothing's really happened there on that front. I guess we're still just waiting for whoever that's going to be to send some sort of proof of concept through. Yeah, I totally understand if nobody has time to do that, because I don't have time to do that. And but when and if anybody does, that would be cool. There is a little bit of discussion going on in there. If you want to participate in that, just let me know if you're not already. But it's just like right now it's just in a private repo under my name. I guess I could make it public. I can't remember why we made it private. Or maybe I did that unilaterally. I don't even remember, but there's like a little repo, and in that repo is absolutely nothing except an issue that says, hey, let's implement this argument parsing in Node, and these are what I think the basic requirements should be, and that's about as far as we've gotten. So that's all I got. So Ben, often I know that you have things you are excited about and want to tell us about. So do you have any of those things?
Mainly right now, I've just been continuing to work on test coverage type stuff. So Node's using the test coverage I did now, which is really cool, but we've run into some bugs around V8. So my life right now has just been trying to backport some V8 issues to fix up test coverage. This kind of, I don't think this is related to our team, but it's kind of an interesting question. The whole process around getting V8 merged back into Node is just like, it takes like 12 weeks. And what will happen is like a really great new feature will land in, V8, and the process is pretty janky for actually getting it through. So probably outside of the tooling group, but if we're continuing to work upstream on things like V8 and on like libuv and whatnot, like it would be kind of cool if we automated that flow a little bit better, but probably beyond our scope. But
so one of my many hats is helping out with keeping V8 current. We have a bunch of automation around testing and bumping majors, backporting. Oh, and also backporting. We have the Node core utils has a script for backporting commits.
yeah, I've noticed with the test coverage stuff that it tends to touch enough code that the backport script will just be a merge nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a little bit frightening too, because you're, you end up kind of manually fiddling with a ton of C++ code to try to get it to land cleanly. And, it feels weird.
That's
like,
the plus and minuses of C++ is that usually if it compiles, then you're like 90% into correctness. But I'll give it a really quick overview of how we keep V8 current. As V8 manages at any point in time 3 branches. There's the official GA general availability version that's current, and this goes for Chromium as well. And every 12 weeks, they cut the new branch and move everything downstream. All these versions are considered major. Node tries to have at least, so we have general availability, we have beta, and we have dev. And there's also the nightlist, the tip of the Git repo. Node tries to be up to date with the general availability of V8 and Chromium, but that is V8, the latest V8 goes into Node's master. Once there's a version out of Node, backports of major versions of V8 are they get into this debate whether they are really breaking changes or not, and whether it's possible to backport them. So Node essentially is at least 6 months behind the most recent V8. So yeah, things are difficult in that sense. Like if you fix something in V8's master, it might take up to 6 months for it to get into Node.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the only thing I've been working on. It's just maybe we could take it offline, but getting some help to figure out how to cherry pick that stuff would be nice. Because if we're 6 months, the frustrating thing with test coverage has been it's super cool, and it's nice that we're able to use V8, like we are able to use V8's inspector protocol, but the 6 month lag can be kind of painful when you have these kind of deep-seated issues, right? So I guess it's teaching me maybe we're doing the right thing by pulling in rimwrap as closer to a userland module too, because coverage has been an interesting experiment and trying to do it at a really low level and it being a complete hassle.
So just as an FYI, we do have what's called the V8 Canary. It's an automated script that tries to build Node against the latest known good revision of V8, compile it and release it as a binary for anybody who really wants to work with like an extreme cutting edge version. That work is done in GitHub/Node.js/Node-V8. It's a good place to work on stuff like this, but keep in mind that getting that stuff really out in the world might take a long time.
Cool.
Make sure I understand this. So basically, if there's a fix we wanna send upstream or something, it might take 6 months for it to come all the way back around to be merged into Node. Is that right?
Worst case, yes. What happens usually is if it's something critical, we float a patch on the node on the version that we keep in Node until it gets merged and downstreamed and upstreamed again. Then we stop floating that patch. Second worst to that is we fix it in V8 and then we request somebody in V8 to backport it to the current general availability release. That way we can keep everything in sync and just backport it as a patch version. And well, maybe that's like the best case now, is that, yeah, we fix it and everything is back portable and it gets back into the most recent V8.
It's interesting. So we managed to backport coverage to V10, I think. Node V, well, not really back. Yeah, we backported the bunch of patches to V10, but it was like a 15 patch merge hell basically. And it feels like some of the new fixes for coverage are going to be the same thing. So it's just a hassle, but it is doable. Like you can get it in within a couple of months. You can get it in within a few weeks if you're willing to do the footwork.
And then what then is what's the disadvantage of floating more patches?
It starts to look like a Frankenstein's monster. Like you're the V8 in Node, like months into being, like when you say you're 5 months in and a ton of patches have been floated with some manual changes to land them, you start getting this thing that doesn't quite look that much like any real release of V8. Like, I've definitely seen bugs that crop up in Node's V8 that don't crop up in the mainline V8, like specifically around coverage, because I've had to make some manual changes to the code to even make them landable. So it can end up a little Frankenstein monstery.
Yeah, and then there's developer focus. The people in Node, there's a very small subset who are really versed in V8 internals, and if the bugs are opened in the Node repo, they just essentially get abandoned or delayed until the full V8 cycle. So essentially and I think that happened almost with all patches to V8. We had them spend some time in the V8 repo getting actual V8 reviews before being backported. I don't remember, maybe it happened, but I don't remember like a case of something that was patched only in Node and didn't get any like V8 review. At least an attempt to upstream it has been done to get that feedback. So that's like, so the issue here is developer focus. We would like V8 issues to be dealt with and reviewed, etc., on the V8 repo, and come back to Node only after some sort of rubber stamp.
Yeah, I think where this actually it becomes pertinent is I really want to dust off work on source maps again, which would be both in V8 and Node probably. I would love help if anyone else is passionate about this too. If anyone on the live stream as well.
Yeah, I kind of volunteered the last time you brought that up. I'm definitely interested in helping with both source maps and doing some work on V8. So
cool. Yeah, and I think source maps, like the proper place to do it is V8. And I know who we need to talk to, which is Hashseed is their GitHub handle. It's just like someone needs to actually get it in motion. But then we have two important features in Node that do kind of wait on V8 whenever we're patching bugs. So we need to get good at upstreaming them.
Alrighty. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up? Got any ideas you want to kick around? Any like cool stuff that you've seen on the CLI that makes you excited? And I don't know, anything like that? Anything you want to chat about?
So there was an issue I touched on briefly in the past, and that's getting some sort of a JavaScript parser into Node Core. Since we have at least two, we have the V8 actual binary parser, and we have Acorn bundled in the binary. Somebody brought up the issue in the Node repo, asking Node Core to publish Acorn APIs. And some people have been pushing back on that and saying like there's no standard AST or IR for JavaScript, so we don't want to make Acorn like the de facto standard. And this difference between the V8 parsing, which we'll consider like the truth, and Acorn parsing, the gap between those two will be surprising to developers, etc. I think it's something that might interest people around tooling, because a ton of tools either parse JavaScript or are heavily based on parsing, stuff from linting, bundling, transcompilation, document generation. Like a ton of tools are parse based, and I would really like to see something more robust being mainlined. Point of thought.
More robust than what?
Then npm install Babel, Prima, Acorn, etc.
Right.
Having a parser as a package, as any other package, has its pluses and minuses, but what I'd really love to see is V8 exposing some sort of API and allow userland modules to consume the V8 parser.
I think why I would be excited about this is that one of the biggest problems I've run into doing source map work is there's disagreement on what an atom of the language is, depending on whether you're using Babel or Esprema or whatever. So coverage will be like a few characters off depending on the parser that's generating the coverage. Or sorry, not coverage, source maps. Because there's like a lack of agreement between what is an atomic unit of the JavaScript language, which I know there are specs written for. So having a spec compliant compiler would be super nice. That people standardize.
There's no spec for what the IST should look like, and then you get into like what's an atom, like with white spaces, semicolons, and all of the fantastic things we have in JavaScript.
Exactly, and no one agrees, which is why source maps are just ridiculously underdefined.
So it's nice to balance the pushback with some push for from people doing actually consuming these products and these tools and these packages.
I guess, like, personally, I would be hesitant to want to accept whatever V8 hands you as the standard, because V8 is not the only JavaScript runtime around.
No, but like it is the JavaScript engine that runs Node. So if you're in Node, I'd like to see the same parser that's actually going to evaluate my code, parse my code. And if the VM is replaced with Chakra or JavaScript or SpiderMonkey, then have that do the same. Like the same VM that's going to run my code, I'd like it to parse my code. But anyway, I think as we've seen many times with TC39, is standard come to be based on push from the ecosystem. So if we'd have even an ad hoc API node that returns an abstract syntax tree, work on a standard might happen sooner rather than later. So I'm not saying that it's the JavaScript of Node.
Out of curiosity, what is Node using Acorn for?
Some bringing things that are like strawman or phase 2 into the repo. Stuff like top level await, async iterators before they happened, private class fields, stuff that we want to play with in Node sooner rather than later.
Meaning stuff that hasn't landed in V8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we also use Acorn for the aforementioned document, like the API documentation linking. We would like parse the source, try to find the implementations of functions, and then generate a GitHub link and put that into the documentation. So if you look at file system / open, then it will, and you can click and jump to the source where that's implemented. So that's also an interesting implementation. I could think of like a couple of other things that we could do in Node Core as if we had an interesting parser. We do weird things with the source in order to bundle it into the binary. We do that in Python right now.
I linked an issue in the chat there, 27772. Is that the issue that you're referring to, where somebody wanted to see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Quickly shut down, it looks like.
Yeah, mostly because it's it's a feature request, and then Node it doesn't have really like a brain bank of people who are willing to pick up feature requests. So usually the ask is submit a PR and let's see some bits, and then we can discuss this further. Also, this issue was shut down because nobody said, hey, we would like to see that. As usual, with lazy consensus, once you get some naysayers, then things just block unless somebody's really willing to do the work.
Yeah.
I mean, it does feel like if V8 was exposing a way to just put in JavaScript, get out AST, that would be really valuable in API that Node could just piggyback on.
Yeah, there was a discussion about that. There is a discussion about that comes up every so often, and V8 says we like to keep this private because we grow crazy with like our internal implementation, and we change it quite often, and we don't want to lock down into public API.
All right. Well, almost out of time. Any last minute stuff anybody's got? No. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, and we will talk again in 3 weeks. I believe that is after the Collab Summit, and so if anything comes out of the Collab Summit worth mentioning, I'll be sure to report it back somehow. So anyway, thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.